A dog and a lion grew up together and they were inseparable. A pig and a dog grew up together and they became best friends. Is that what you have heard or seen somewhere? Animals have their own intelligence and characteristics, but in general, they are very friendly if given enough time to get to know each other. In today's story, we want to share with you the story of Tinny and a fox Sniffer. They became friends in a very special way, and after that, they were inseparable. Keep watching this video of Animals Need Love to listen to the meaningful story of their love. The story of the dog Tinny and the wild fox Sniffer is one of the most heartwarming examples of the bond between two entirely different species. It's a tale of an unlikely friendship that began several years ago and continues to inspire me every day as an animal lover and nature enthusiast. It all started in the forest near a house in Norway, where Torgeir Berge, who lives with his loyal companion Tinny. As a photographer, he spends countless hours exploring the wilderness, capturing its raw beauty and the lives of its inhabitants. One day, a small, clever fox appeared near his property. The fox was skinny and clearly hungry, scavenging for anything edible. He couldn't ignore its plight and decided to leave out some food for the fox. This fox, whom he named Sniffer, quickly grew accustomed to these offerings. Before long, he began visiting regularly, showing up almost every day, seemingly knowing Berge wouldn't let him leave empty-handed. At first, he was cautious and kept his distance, watching me with his bright, intelligent eyes. Foxes are naturally wary of humans, as they are often hunted and mistreated. Despite his caution, Sniffer kept returning, and over time, Berge noticed something extraordinary happening. Berge's dog, Tinny, a friendly and playful soul, was watching these visits from a distance. One day, his curiosity got the better of him, and he approached Sniffer. To Berge's amazement, the two animals didn't show any signs of aggression or fear. Instead, they began to interact, sniffing each other cautiously at first, and then chasing each other in a playful manner. From that day onward, their bond grew stronger. Tinny and Sniffer spent hours together, running through the fields, playing along the riverbanks, and even swimming in the nearby stream. They acted like lifelong friends, completely unaware of the fact that they belonged to different species. In the evenings, Berge would sometimes find them lying side by side, Tinny's soft fur against Sniffer's bushy tail, under the moonlit sky. Foxes, like dogs, belong to the Canidae family, sharing many similar traits in behavior and social instincts. However, foxes are uniquely independent and resourceful animals. They are excellent hunters, capable of adapting to various environments, from forests to urban settings. Foxes are curious, playful, and highly intelligent, qualities that made Sniffer such a fascinating creature to observe. Unfortunately, these remarkable animals are often misunderstood and subjected to cruelty. Foxes are hunted extensively for their fur, which is used in the fashion industry. Despite growing awareness about animal rights, the demand for fox fur remains high, leading to the suffering and death of countless foxes each year. This heartbreaking reality made Sniffer's presence even more meaningful to Berge. Over the years, Berge has documented Tinny and Sniffer's friendship through photography. Capturing their playful moments and quiet companionship has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. Their unique bond has also deepened Berge's understanding of foxes and their behaviors. Sniffer's playful antics, cautious nature, and undeniable intelligence have shown me that foxes are not just wild animals. They are individuals with personalities, emotions, and a right to live without fear of harm. This friendship inspired Berge to use my photography to raise awareness about the plight of foxes. He is currently working on a book that will showcase the story of Tinny and Sniffer, accompanied by stunning photographs of their adventures. Through this book, Berge hopes to change people's perceptions of foxes, encouraging them to see these creatures not as pests or commodities, but as beautiful and vital members of our ecosystem. The proceeds from the book will go toward campaigns against the fur trade and initiatives to protect wild fox populations. It's Burge's way of giving back to Sniffer, who has taught him so much about the resilience and beauty of his kind. Tinny and Sniffer's friendship is a testament to the fact that love and connection can transcend boundaries. It reminds us that animals, whether domesticated or wild, are capable of forming deep, meaningful relationships. Their story is not just about them, it's about us, how we perceive and treat the creatures with whom we share this planet. This unique bond has become a symbol of hope and compassion, proving that even in a world filled with differences, harmony is possible. For Burge, as both a photographer and an animal lover, Tinny and Sniffer's story will always hold a special place in my heart, a reminder of the profound lessons we can learn from nature. What do you think about this relationship? Comment below to let us know what you think. And if you're also raising different animals in the same house, don't hesitate to share their stories here. Animals Need Love will be the place where we share those wonderful stories with each other. So, if you love this content, please subscribe and press the bell button to receive touching stories about daily life from us. Thank you for following and supporting us. See you in tomorrow's story.